All right, we're going to talk regulation. Why don't we have a quick introduction from all of you, starting with Esteban.
I'm Esteban van Goor. I work for Baker McKenzie as an indirect tax lawyer, and I recently set up a fund. So I'm a lawyer for 1 month more, and then I'm going to be a VC.
Juan Llanos, I'm an advisor in risk management and compliance for the crypto space, currently working with Consensus Systems building a reg tech, legal tech, gov tech practice.
Hi guys, I'm Anthony Bravasoli. I'm a partner at Hassan's International Law Firm, and I head the fintech, financial services, crypto departments over there. That's me.
I'm Fernando Gutierrez. I work for the DAS project. I'm in the board, and I take care of the legal staff we've been facing in the last 3 years.
4 years? 4 years. I'm Veronica McGregor. I'm a fintech lawyer from the Silicon Valley, and I deal with a lot of blockchain and ICO issues these days.
All right, so let's talk blockchain ICOs. This is the name of the conference. I think everybody has on their minds regulation, law. How are we going to maintain? How are we going to make a legal ICO? Where are we going to base our ICO company? How are we going to structure the business? Maybe we can just start with some best practices from all of you guys. If you were to launch an ICO yourself, some of the best practices of what you think is the best jurisdiction, best practices of KYC, how would you go about doing it let's share some best practices.
Let me start with that. The first thing I recommend to everyone is to understand how regulation works and do what I call KYR, know your regulator and know your regulation. And there's basically three kinds of regulations or sets of regulators. One is stimulative. There's policy that is about stimulating the economy. So you can appeal to that with ideas about how to grow the economy, how to innovate, how to create growth and development for the nation and for the jurisdiction. The second one is prudential regulation, sets of controls to protect the marketplace from falling apart, basically, and authorizing the right people to be players in the marketplace. And number three is law enforcement. Law enforcement are there to enforce the law, and they will do whatever is in their power to come down on someone who's breaking the law. So if you don't understand that, you may be preaching to barking up the wrong tree, and preaching to the wrong message to the wrong regulator. And then each of those has a policy group, a supervisor group, and an enforcement group. So you have to be aware of which audience you're talking to and plan your strategy around those three types of regulators and those three internal functions. That's my first recommendation.
Yeah, I think maybe on top of that, like if you look at regulation, I hear a lot of people always say, hey, maybe I can go to Malta, or in the past, of course, Singapore, Switzerland, Isle of Man now, and I completely agree with the three points. But there, I think one other thing you should take into account, what if other regulators or other legislators are going to look into your ICO and going to ask for extradition? So that's also a point which you should take into account. If you're safe in Isle of Man, it's all great, but then they're going to receive a request. Like Isle of Man, Malta, Gibraltar, they all have those things. So also take that into account.
Extradition.
Extradition, yeah.
I think the most important thing is, make sure you're falling within the parameters of the law. So basically, make sure you're not a security, and if you are, make sure you take the appropriate measures. And basically, get proper advice. There are a lot of good consultants out there, a lot of good service providers out there. Find the right jurisdiction for you. I mean, Gibraltar now is quite prevalent, but it doesn't mean that it's the right jurisdiction for you. You need to find the right place for your model, and yeah, make sure security is a big thing now as well. You need to make sure you have your proper security against hacking and all that sort of thing. You see a lot of hacks going on now, so make sure your platforms are secure, where you're providing information, your telegrams, your Slack channels, these sort of things. But yeah, I think most importantly, make sure that you're not on the wrong side of the law.
Quickly, just a quick legal question. What is the responsibility if you have a Slack channel and there's some spammer and some people steal some money through that because it wasn't secured properly? Is there like a one-sentence answer to that? before we go to the best practice from Fernando and Veronica, like, we see that a lot. They send these fake links and then people lose some money. And whose fault was that?
I think the team. I mean, the team themselves. I mean, they need to make sure that their channels are secure.
I think it's twofold. Like, one, you have a team. On the other hand, if you get a link and it says, hey, here's my Ether wallet, like, please open your wallet, put in your private key there, come on, like,
You think it's the assumption
before you do it.
All right.
Yeah.
Fernando.
My advice is a bit unusual. It's focus on delivery of your product, and you will stay out of trouble. Many ICOs I see are trying to over-optimize the legal part and forget about the product. And I understand the fear, because the regulator is scary. But you can't lose sight on the product. You're going to get in trouble if you don't deliver. It doesn't matter the regulation, the location, where are you registered. If you fuck up your investors, they are going to go after you.
Agree with that 100%.
Focus on delivery. Every day, because I'm involved with a project which is already known, I'm getting offers from ICOs to be their advisor, and when you tell them, but what are you doing? No, we are setting this structure or whatever, and what do I have to do? Nothing, just, I don't want to get involved with that, because you are not focusing on what matters, which is your token, your project, whatever you want to do, focus on that, and things will be much easier. People don't get crazy at you when you are earning money for them.
I mean, if you deliver a product which is bad, like that does something negative
Do
to the
what
world.
you said you were going to do.
No, but if it's a negative thing in the world, it's not.
Of course. But I think also there, it's not only about deliverable. I hear, like, when I got asked, like, to be an advisor, a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm going to ask my standard questions. And one of the questions is including legal structure, whether or not you already have an investor, what are your plans, what's your team, etc. There are many questions which I will ask, and I refuse, like, being an advisor on a lot of ICOs. I just don't do it. But one important thing which a lot of people don't take into account as well is the tax side of things. They think, oh, if I have, like, all this financial law covered, I'm good to go. Okay, well, if I was a tax inspector in any of the jurisdictions, I'm not going to give them tips because I know this is being recorded, but I would for sure go for something including, like, VAT or corporate income tax, and that's going to cost you a big chunk of your
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think as many people are looking at the structure rather than the tax implications.
No.
Veronica, best practices, story one.
Oh, no, so here's the deal. You're telling me, or telling them, focus on your product, not so much on regulation. So as a regulatory lawyer, I'm going to say, sure, focus on your product, make sure you are offering a real thing, but if you get shut down by a regulator, you're never delivering anything. Yeah. So you really do want, I'm going to stick with the know your regulator, know your regulations, because certainly in the US it's very complicated, it's all very gray. There are places that are more hospitable to the idea of an ICO. Gibraltar may be one of them. But right now, it's certainly in the US, and that's the law I can talk about. It's gray. We have an opinion from the Securities and Exchange Commission, on what telling you whether you're going to have to be regulated based on what your coin offers or your token, whatever you want to call it. But it's all very gray. So the best a U.S. lawyer can do right now is give you a risk analysis. Exactly. Rather than like a hard and fast opinion.
But I think what Fernando was saying and you were saying are not mutually exclusive.
No, yes, one thing.
You can do both.
No, they're not mutually exclusive. I just want to...
I'm not saying you should ignore regulation. I'm saying it's not the only thing you need
Substance
to look at.
over
Some
form.
projects are only looking at the legal part and ignoring or neglecting the product.
Well, sure.
And I know all of you are going to talk about regulation, so they'll get enough pitches of focus on regulation. I just say don't forget the other part. The other part is important.
Well, it's absolutely important because tied to those regulations are penalties for fraud.
Absolutely. And also, you need to consider not the blockchain regulation, the law in general. Right. You need to have contract with your developers. You need to sign the proper paperwork for everything. I see a lot of developers being paid informally in this space, and that will get you into trouble. You don't need to think about the SEC or whatever. If your developer is getting informally paid and he sues you, you are in deep shit. So you need to focus also on the standard stuff, the everyday business stuff that some people forget about.
And I also think there, like, you can raise 150 million or 200 million, but what are you going to do with it? Is it actually for the delivery of the product, or is there only like 50 million necessary and the rest you're going to go like invest yourself or spend or buy nice things? Like in the end, I always say like in the short term, luck is king, on the long term, skill is king. So always think in the long term on how's my structure set up. I completely agree. Do I know the regulators? Am I speaking with the right lawyers? Don't just go for the first lawyer. I mean, this is just a new area. I'm into this area for a long time. I'm not going to say that I'm the specialist because nobody can say that they're a specialist. Like after like 20, 25 years, you can say, yeah, I am the specialist in this area. Currently, it's all new, it's all open.
Yeah, I agree, and I think also it's important to, like you said, I mean, we get a lot of, I'm sure everybody on this panel gets a lot of inquiries as to ICOs and, where can we set up, how do we set up? And there are, I like to have a standard list of questions that I ask, and if I don't get satisfactory answers to those questions right away, then that raises red flags, Or if you don't know yourself, your product well enough, then what hope do you have? I mean, you can't expect us to tell you how to market your business or how to how to structure your token either.
Oh, okay, so let's talk about. There's a couple conversations we need to have here. We don't have so much time, but we're kind of looking forward into the future. Right now, we're in a bit of an interesting space where the money is flowing fast. The developers need to work fast. And to take care of legal issues and take flights to Switzerland and Gibraltar every day hurts the product. And especially as there's peaks and high Ethereum price and high Bitcoin price, people want to capture and make as big a net as possible to capture things and to raise as much money as possible right now. In the future, let's say 2 years down the line, what do things look like in terms of the regulation and the way an ICO is made? Do you guys have any input on that, what we're looking at in the future?
Yeah, so can I go? In Gibraltar, for example, it's very prevalent at the moment. I mean, we are the first jurisdiction, I would say, that is actually regulating cryptocurrency exchanges, for example. So other jurisdictions I know try and squeeze cryptocurrency exchanges into money transmitters licenses, and then they try to fit them in or squeeze them into the existing frameworks that they have, and often it just doesn't work. I mean, in Gibraltar, the approach that the regulator is taking is, we're going to have a flexible approach where it's principles-based rather than prescriptive, and it gives the regulator the chance to, say to the firms themselves, you have the ability to almost self-regulate yourselves. Tell us what you are doing. Tell us what measures you have in place. And, if that's good enough for us, then we'll give you a...
So 2 years from now, I think we still will have the same problems we have today. So I'm very skeptical about the future, especially the changes in regulation that need to happen. First of all, think about how regulation works today. It's activity-based. If you're a banker, banking regulation applies to you. If you're a money transmitter regulation applies to you, et cetera, et cetera. It's industry-specific. Aviation has their own regulations. Health has regulations, so it's industry-specific. It's jurisdiction-bound by geography. And it's intermediary enforced. You always need someone in the middle to enforce it. So all those things clash head-on with a peer-to-peer distributed, headless, jurisdictionless, completely permissionless system as a blockchain is, or blockchains are. So how do you reconcile that? And then you have very aggressive jurisdictions like the United States, where supervision and policy are protective of their status quo, but enforcement is very aggressive. Right? So, and by the way, there's extraterritorial reach in the United States.
Well, that's
right?
the thing.
So all these things have to be, we have to pay attention to all these.
One of the things that you're saying, sorry, Esteban, but so when you're talking about where is the best place to, where's the best place to, form your entity or launch an ICO or whatever you're going to do, what's tricky about that question is that certainly with the United States, if you are going to be seeking United States investors, then the laws that surround these things, the securities laws and the commodities laws and the money transmitter laws, they are protecting the U.S. Citizenry, right? So the U.S. will say, if you're going to be reaching to our consumers, then you, or investors, you need to be regulated by us. We will regulate you. So you can, even if you wanted to form an exchange in Gibraltar or anywhere else, If you're reaching out to United States citizens, then the United States is going to take regulatory jurisdiction over you.
I fully agree with what's being said here. I mean, my area of expertise is e-commerce and VAT and gaming and of course crypto. But in relation to e-commerce, in 1998 in Japan, the OECD signed an agreement on what's the definition of an electronically supplied service. So we're now 20 years later, almost 20 years later, and there's still no clear definition about what's an electronically supplied service. 20 years. And like with electronically supplied service, I mean, if you look at Netflix, if you look at Google, Facebook, all these type of things, they're all under scrutiny. They're always under discussion. And don't think that like in 2 years we will have like this, like a full set of regulation for ICOs. No, that will take many, many, many years.
So, yeah, I guess I was trying to get you guys to predict 2 years and then reverse engineer it so we can do it now. I guess maybe in 20, 50 years, that would be the answer. So,
We need to start talking
not be
with
alive.
regulators.
I also think, I think it will depend a lot on how we all behave also. Because ICOs are something of this year. I mean, in May there were a couple of ICOs and now we are seeing 20 a week or something like that. So there's going to be an explosion somehow. There are going to be projects that will crash, people that will get hurt. And depending on the extent of that damage, the regulation will change. The regulation is many times reactive because it's slow. So we are going to get hurt by that. And depending on how we behave before, that will affect the future a lot.
Let's talk about how we behave and talk about the sort of community policing that exists now. We have services like Zeppelin and Hacken, which will do code review and pen testing, and we have formal auditors and big consultancy firms being organically grown in crypto space to mimic and mirror some of the stuff that exists in a normal IPO world. What are your guys' thoughts about that? Is that some sort of like collaborative middle ground to bridge it?
Yes, I like the fact that it also ties with Fernando's comments on focus on the product. Substance is more important than form all the time, especially when an examiner comes in and audits you internally. If you have a strong product, even if I've been a compliance officer 15 years, and we may not have implemented something technically within a jurisdiction. We may have failed to include some language on the website, but when someone comes in and they look at your back office, your monitoring, your oversight, your controls, your control environment, that is what matters. It's the substance over the form, always. And so everything we do to protect the product before it's launched throughout the life cycle is always very important, is actually fundamental.
Yeah, because ICO is not just launching the token and getting the money. It's all comes behind that.
And I think they're also like, speak with regulators. Don't be afraid of that. I know that the European Commission, they want to set up like this blockchain group. Yeah, feel free, give input there. Like I always compare it to iGaming, so internet gambling. And what you saw there, it's a boom. Like you had the moneymaker effect, they called it. In 2004, Chris Moneymaker won the main event. Then online poker boomed. Like everybody was playing online poker. It was an unregulated area. And what you saw then was that each European member state was setting their own legislation in relation to iGaming. It's a nightmare. And that's not what you want. If they would have done it properly, they would have already spoken with the European Commission. They would have already educated them, like, this is the product. This is the best way to get like a regulated framework and then take it up from there. That's not perfect law, but at least it's better than what you have now. It's a lot of insecurities.
But the problem with that is that if you go to the EU Commission, it can take months,
an example.
Years,
Yeah.
and that's what, for example, in Gibraltar, going to your e-gaming example.
Yeah, but they all moved to Malta almost, like a lot.
Well, a lot of companies, a lot of operators move to Malta, but Gibraltar, makes sure that it holds only the top operators, and that's sort of the qualitative over the quantitative approach that we take. But the reason why I was alluding to your point is because you can't just sit back and wait for the EU or other jurisdictions to move. You have to create regulations yourself if you think that's the right thing.
There's a huge problem. Why is it that we assume that regulation always lags behind innovation and technology? Why are we comfortable, or why do we accept a mediocrity of our own policymakers and regulators? Why can't they not also study technology and become engineers and become technology savvy and accompany the growth and the evolution of humanity.
They have like a
Why do we
50-year
have to
backlog.
rely on one unsophisticated guy deciding whether that company is approved or not?
Yeah, but they got like a 50-year backlog. They're still working out
and
the
so
Gutenberg
I'm concerned
press.
about the quality of our regulators.
Regulators, yeah, sure.
Fair point, except for they have all the power and.
Exactly.
so-
Why
and
do they
so-
have the power if they're our service? They're public citizens, public servants.
Okay, true. But it's not going to happen like that.
No, I agree.
So they need to have
It's not
expertise in
realistic.
That's
We're in
adorable,
agreement.
but it's not going to happen
Tell,
that way.
show me an engineer that wants to be a regulator, a real engineer, a good one, one of
Yeah,
They
the
should
right.
get paid.
one
That's the
sitting
thing.
in this room.
I
Any
was talking
engineer
this
that
with
wants to be a
someone like-
regulator.
Raise your hand if you want to be a regulator.
Why can't we not
Right,
create
exactly.
Why can't we not create a crypto economic system to incentivize them? Why can't we not create maybe a token system to incentivize them to be more professional and more technology savvy? I mean, it's a crazy idea, right? Is it conflicts of interest and all that? But what if we upgrade our regulatory infrastructure?
It's not going to raise 100 million in 10 minutes. This is a really good regulation panel, right? Like we still got 10 minutes to go. And
We
we're
needed
moving right
some
along.
sizzle. That's why we are adding some.
Let's do it.
But may I say, this just came out. If you want to focus on what's going to happen in the future, the SEC just launched a cyber unit, enforcement unit, that enforcement side of the SEC. They're going to focus on market manipulation schemes, hacking to obtain material non-public information, violations involving the DLT and initial coin offerings, misconduct perpetrated in the dark web, intrusions into retail brokerage accounts, and cyber-related threats to trading platforms. Yesterday. So that's the focus. You should focus on strengthening that part of the product.
Half the
Yes.
room is going to escape right now.
Well, I think you could still buy a new passport on the darknet, so can work it out.
That's okay.
Let's keep going. I guess we talked about Europe a lot. We're talking about each jurisdiction versus jurisdiction. Is there a best one? Can it insulate you? Can a different jurisdiction insulate you globally from something? Can
I
going
think
to
he's right because of the U.S. is so powerful
Can
and
moving-
it's
can
going to be
moving
messing
to-
with you no matter where you are.
No, if you
Either
move-
you forget about U.S. citizens or you need
Right.
to do something in the U.S.
if you move your company
But
Singapore,
more and more projects are going to ignore U.S. citizens. There are some companies already and banks around the world that if you are an American, they're not going to open you a bank account. So I think that approach is wrong by the U.S. government, but it's right. You need to take them into
so
account.
that's in the beginning. I'm talking about, okay, so whatever happens in the beginning with the setup of the company, you move to Singapore, you block IPs, and you exclude U.S.
Right.
citizens. Then there's the token launch and token distribution that goes on the exchanges. What happens there in the lifetime of a token as it
Well,
relates to different jurisdictions?
Again, regulation is jurisdiction specific. So every single authority within each jurisdiction is capable of enforcing their local regulation. That's how the law works today, right? So the problem is that we have these balkanized legal systems in an age of sharing of data, digital sharing, and data distributed platforms. And this is why we need to also change how the law works and how enforcement works. And probably the best choice is to go to the supranational bodies like the FinCEN, the FATCA, Financial Action Task Force in Paris that regulates all of the KYC and AML rules supranationally, or the IOSCO, right, International Organization of Securities Commissions. So this is where I think where we should start influencing policy changes and understanding of technology. But again, this is a process that's going to take years and years and years because the regulation works this way today, and they have the authority to enforce rules today, right?
And you should keep them interesting. I mean, you and myself, we have like some experience with that. Like for 3 years ago, you were presenting at the G20.
Yeah.
So, and that was based on a paper which I co-wrote. So I didn't see much happening there. Of course, it was mentioned by the OECD, but then later on, yeah, what's happening with it? So it's again, I think I fully agree with like each jurisdiction can enforce their own law. So take that really into account. So if one jurisdiction says, "Hey, I have this perfect framework," yeah, just look at it and look at it for the long term, not only for the short term.
I think what will happen in the future is, obviously there are going to be some jurisdictions that are first movers. Gibraltar is a good example because they're just small jurisdiction and flexible. But eventually what I think will happen is each jurisdiction will come out with their own type of regulation, and they'll have to be compatible. So it's basically following on from what happened in the e-gaming model, right? Everybody blocked the US because of their, restrictions, and bit by bit, other jurisdictions within the EU started to say, okay, if you want to operate in my jurisdiction, you also need a license.
So, and also the US at some point will realize, because their focus on enforcement and restriction is going to crush innovation locally, and they're going to see innovation happen elsewhere. And this is a game theory that is beginning to happen already across nations.
Yeah, it's the geopolitical arbitrage. Where should
Exactly.
you make your country? Where can you make your company to?
Also, this all has a very nice for us, for everyone in the space, consequences, is that regulation is getting so complex that enforcement is getting more complex. There's a point where regulators are not realizing, because they are not understanding many times the technology, that what they propose is unenforceable. So in the end, there's a lot of laws out there that you simply can't comply with. So it's going to get more complex. The good part about that is that you probably are going to be okay, but it's a really bad situation to be in, knowing that you can't comply and you are breaking the law. Probably you'll be okay because they don't even know what they are legislating in many cases.
Yeah, and yes, it would be wonderful if our regulators were as tech savvy as the innovators, but that's not typically how regulation works, because it does have to be, fixing something they see as a risk. I wanted to get back to something Esteban said just when he said go to your regulators and sort of run it by them and see what they think. And you made the point that's going to take forever. And that's true almost everywhere, certainly true in the United States. In addition to the fact that it will take forever, sometimes they won't give you an answer because they don't understand the technology and they're afraid. So sometimes, you can get a no action letter. Those are rare, meaning, well, we're not going to take any action on this, so you carry on. But they won't go so far as to say what you're doing is okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing to know is, or not to know because you'll know it, but to consider is just if you go and ask for permission to do something, you have to live with the answer you get, which is why a lot of the innovators in the Silicon Valley where I work operate on that. It's easier to get forgiveness than permission sort of concept.
As long as you do things properly and you have good faith, what people are saying, then when they come, it's okay.
Yes and no.
Sometimes.
Right. Sometimes it is okay. If you make sure you got your KYC and AML and all that stuff buttoned down and you think you're doing everything, but you can't fudge something like registration as a securities broker. You either are or you are not registered as a securities broker. So you can do everything correctly to a point without doing that. But if you are deemed to be selling securities, then and you're not registered, then you are breaking the law. But anyway, so I just want to make the point that it will take a while. I almost never suggest that my clients go and ask.
I don't fully agree with that. I did it a few times for clients, and we got a no action letter, and that's a statement from the authorities that they're not regulated. And of course, you put in like a KYC, AML framework, and you look at other things. So you're self-regulated. You just make it completely in line with the jurisdiction you're in. And if the regulator says, hey, there's no regulation for you, that's a good letter to have on file. So if
Quick closing statement.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is
10 seconds.
So first, there's an old Yiddish saying, which is, if you don't ask the rabbi, the chicken is kosher. That doesn't apply here so much. There's a concept I wanted to get to, and maybe you guys can all talk to them about this in the future, which is there a point where if this is all regulated, way more money is going to flow in from pension funds and institutions? Is that going to happen, or is regulation going to take so much time that everybody's just going to open a Bitfinex account?
Only the risk takers will throw money around now. Only very high people with appetite for risk.
Yeah.
The pension funds are not going to get in until we have clarity and an orderly market.
Too late.
It really depends what your aim is. Like, is it trading or is it the ICO investment?
Yeah. All right. Closing statement, one line.
I highly recommend, because I appreciate the growth of the industry, and this is, I think, the future. We should all read Neil Ferguson's The Great Degeneration to see how law and the corruption of the legal system has damaged the economy of Earth. And then number 2 is we should read everything that Vinay Gupta writes, who was here yesterday, and we should read everything that Nick Szabo writes also.
And come to every
we
one
should
of my
think about
conferences.
reinventing regulation for the 21st century.
Yes. We can close on that. All right. Please give a big round of applause to the regulation
Thank you.
panel.